On May 8, 1945, Europe witnessed the conclusion of a long and brutal war, but peace was still elusive in other parts of the world. In the Pacific, the conflict with Japan continued, and despite the Allies reclaiming territory island by island, Japanese resistance remained strong. A direct assault on the Japanese home islands became necessary, though experience suggested it would extend into 1946. Before considering the use of the atomic bomb, the U.S. Navy planned traditional coastal bombardments to cripple Japan's industrial capacity. In July and August, Allied fleets aggressively targeted Japanese ports with greater success than anticipated. The island-hopping strategy had been costly for American forces. By late 1944, Japanese expansion had been halted. In November, the U.S. captured the Mariana Islands, establishing air bases for bombing campaigns against mainland Japan. Simultaneously, the last Japanese naval forces were defeated at Leyte Gulf and around the Philippines. In early 1945, the U.S. launched an assault on Iwo Jima, a key location between the Marianas and Japan, providing another base for air raids. The next major objective was Okinawa, which triggered a massive offensive involving over 1,300 ships, including those of the British Pacific Fleet. Despite overwhelming force and relentless air attacks, the Japanese put up fierce resistance. 10 battleships and 9 cruisers unleashed over 13,000 shells on the island. On April 1st, 4 U.S. divisions landed, initiating a grueling battle for control of the 486 square mile territory. The defenders, entrenched in underground positions, held out for 3 months. Japanese counterattacks failed, and the island eventually fell to the Americans. The battle required 170,000 U.S. troops and resulted in 8,000 American deaths. Although victory brought the end of the war closer, the heavy losses raised doubts about the viability of invading the Japanese mainland. Faced with these challenges, U.S. Navy strategists recommended a blockade and continued bombardment to force Japan's surrender. Meanwhile, General Douglas MacArthur in the Army pushed for an invasion of Kyushu as a precursor to an assault on Honshu. Admiral Chester Nimitz supported this plan, leading to the development of Operation Downfall. It was to unfold in 2 parts: Operation Olympic, targeting Kyushu in November, and Operation Coronet, aimed at Honshu in March 1946. Given the high casualty rate at Okinawa, the force assembled for Kyushu numbered 767,000 troops. In response, Japan prepared Operation Ketsugo, a massive defense plan involving around 3 million soldiers, intending to shatter American resolve. In mid-1945, the U.S. intensified its air campaign, bombarding Japanese cities and industrial centers from the Marianas. Allied naval forces disrupted Japanese trade routes, and fuel shortages left the Japanese Navy largely inactive. The remaining aircraft were conserved for a future invasion. Seeking to end the war without using atomic bombs, the Allies also launched coastal bombardments from battleships against Japanese cities. On July 1st, Admiral William Halsey led the U.S. Third Fleet from Leyte Gulf in the Philippines to attack the Japanese home islands directly. Submarines scouted the coastal waters for mines, while B-29 superfortresses and B-24 Liberators carried out photo reconnaissance to identify targets. Task Force 38, under Vice Admiral John McCain, began airstrikes on July 10th, hitting areas around Tokyo. On July 14th, the task force moved north to attack Hokkaido and northern Honshu, regions previously untouched by American bombers. These bombardments marked the first naval attacks on Japan in nearly a century. The Americans encountered minimal resistance and swiftly sank 11 warships and 20 merchant vessels. They also inflicted damage on 8 additional warships and 21 merchant ships, claiming the destruction of at least 25 Japanese aircraft. Task Force 38 then separated a bombardment group known as Task Unit 34.81, commanded by Rear Admiral John F. Shafroth, Jr. This unit moved toward Kamaichi in northern Honshu, with the goal of destroying one of Japan's largest ironworks facilities. At 11 a.m., the battleship South Dakota raised a signal flag that read, "Never forget Pearl Harbor." It had been expected that Japanese forces would respond to the attacks using aircraft held in reserve, but the Imperial General Headquarters had made a strategic decision not to engage, conserving their remaining resources for a possible large-scale landing. Just after noon on July 14th, the task unit opened fire on the Japan Iron and Steel Corporation's factory. This marked the first Allied bombardment of a coastal Japanese town. The fleet stayed beyond the 100-fathom line due to the absence of minesweeping support. The bombardment delivered 802,410 millimeter shells, 728,200 millimeter shells, and 825,130 millimeter shells. Most struck within the factory grounds, but the blasts ignited fires that engulfed the surrounding town. Despite thick smoke obstructing visibility, American gunners hit their targets with precision. The Japanese offered no resistance. According to a Time magazine report, the guns roared for 2 hours, striking the steel plant with devastating accuracy, while the Japanese response was described as little more than a whisper. The so-called sacred soil of Japan, believed to be defended by divine forces, had been breached. That night, the attacks shifted to Muroran on Hokkaido's southeastern coast. Another unit, Tu 34.82, struck the Japan Steel Company and the Wanashi Ironworks. The following morning, 3 battleships continued the assault, causing significant destruction to both industrial sites and the city. Admiral Halsey, aboard the USS Missouri with his crew, later recalled that those 6 hours were the longest of his life due to the fleet's vulnerability to airstrikes. More coastal bombardments followed throughout July, gradually eliminating Japan's remaining naval presence. Yet the necessity of invading the home islands still loomed. When the New York Times published unusually detailed reports on these raids, it signaled that military censorship was easing and concerns over Japanese intelligence had diminished. On July 26th, the United States, Great Britain, and China issued the Potsdam Proclamation, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender and warning of the total destruction of the homeland if ignored. When it appeared that Japan would not accept the terms, President Harry S. Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb. The first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th, but even after the devastation, Japan refused to yield. A second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki 3 days later. On the same day, the Soviet Union launched an invasion of Manchuria, leaving Japan cornered. By August 10th, the emperor offered to surrender under the conditions outlined in the Potsdam Declaration. As July ended and August began, the Allied fleet temporarily withdrew from the Japanese coast to avoid a typhoon and resupply. On the day of the second atomic bombing, Allied forces attacked a large concentration of aircraft in northern Honshu, claiming the destruction of at least 720 planes. Believing that the Kamaichi ironworks had not been adequately damaged, the Allies carried out another bombardment. This time, the operation included heavy cruisers, USS Boston and St. Paul, along with several light cruisers and destroyers from British and New Zealand forces. For 2 hours, they shelled the city, facing some resistance, though it proved ineffective.